Council to order. We'll begin with a roll call.
Commencing roll call, Vice Chair Blair Whitney,
Here.
Councilmember Juan Carlos Prado,
Here.
Councilmember Everardo Rodriguez,
Here.
Councilmember Native Cersei, Councilmember Kathleen Daly, Councilmember George Salmon, Chair Brooks Esser.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, public comment. Anyone may speak up to 2 minutes on any topic not on the agenda. If you're in the room, please fill out a speaker slip. If you're on Zoom, you may use the raised hand feature. Please note that the council may not discuss or take action on items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment this evening?
No problem. Back to you.
Agenda item number 3, North Fair Oaks Community Plan update scheduled for 30 minutes. The presentation is going to be given by Good City Company.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very glad to be here tonight. Thank you for having me. I'm gonna give an update on the North Fair Oaks Community Plan Review. And before I start, I wanted to introduce Aaron Acton is here, principal of Good City Company, and there's a couple of additional team members that might be on Zoom. Will Gibson is here on Zoom, and all. Can we go to the first slide, please? So this is our team working on this project. Aaron, Leslie Parks, the Director of Economic Development for Good City, Carol Johnson, the Planning Director, myself, and Dara Funk, who is our graphic designer, and also the county team, Steve and Will and Bharat. And so here tonight, we next slide, please. So tonight we're going to do a brief update of where we are specifically with the outreach. We've been here a couple times before, so you guys are already familiar with the review project. We want to get into the specifics of some of the input that we've received over the last several months, but we'll do a brief overview to begin with. We initially introduced this project in November. So last year, this is our 4th community council meeting. We came back in February and May. And during those meetings, in addition to kind of going over some of the work we were doing, we received a lot of input from this council and advice on how to approach the outreach in this community. We also received a lot of input from county staff on the details of how to design this community stakeholder process. So we took a lot of that advice. We created an outreach plan, which we talked about in May. We got a lot of information from you on where to go, who to talk to, and so we've done our best to implement that. And we look forward to sharing kind of some of the outcome from that effort with you tonight. And then we'll talk about the next steps for the project and what we'll be doing over the next couple of months. So before we jump in, rather than me kind of giving you the overview of the project, we did create a brief 2-minute video about the project to share on the project website. And so we just wanted to play the video because this council hasn't seen this particular video here in the past. So and the last time we were here, we saw a video that talked about what is a community plan, what the purpose of a community plan is, but this talks about specifically about this project. So we just wanted to share this video. Some of you have probably already seen it to kind of review the project purpose once again.
What is the North Fair Oaks Community Plan Review Project? The North Fair Oaks Community Plan was adopted in 2011. The plan was developed by the county with input from community members. It is a 25 to 30-year plan in its 12th year of implementation. It covers land use, design guidelines, circulation and parking, health and wellness, infrastructure, and economic development. Some examples of projects from the plan that have been completed include the Friendship Park renovation, the expansion of the Fair Oaks Health Clinic, and community art projects such as the Utility Box Art Project. There is a lot in the plan that has been completed, but there is still a lot left to be done. San Mateo County is evaluating what has been completed and what is left to do. This project is known as the North Fair Oaks Community Plan Review Project. The purpose of this project is to evaluate the progress made towards implementing the North Fair Oaks Community Plan over the last decade, review the plan actions that remain to do and prioritize them with the help of community input, and create performance measures to help track future progress on implementation of the plan. We are collecting community input to learn about North Fair Oaks priorities today. The feedback collected from the North Fair Oaks residents will help prioritize the remaining actions in the plan. When completed, the North Fair Oaks Community Plan Review will be a tool that can be used by San Mateo County staff to help allocate resources to improve quality of life in North Fair Oaks. Want to read the plan, get involved, or ask questions? Visit www.nfoplan.com or email us at nfoplan@smcgov.org.
We had launched this video on our website a couple of months ago, a couple weeks after we launched the outreach. And so I can go to the next slide. I wanted to reiterate that, our hope with this project is that we can ultimately share what we've learned about what is remaining left to do in the plan, how to prioritize that it can be used as a tool by decision makers, by county staff, by other stakeholders who work in North Fair Oaks. And at the end of this process, we would really, our goal is to share this information with all of these stakeholders and again with the community, and hope that kind of sheds some light on, brings people together around what our focus should be in these various different plan areas. And move to the next slide. So when we began the outreach, and a lot of this will be reviewed, I'm going to run through it very quickly. But what our objectives are is to create awareness about the community plan, discuss the plan with residents, and gather input about North Fair Oaks priorities today, since they might be a little bit different than 10 years ago when the plan was originally adopted, or 12 years ago. And we did have a goal of collecting a minimum of 200 surveys. And so we did collect 312 surveys. So we're really happy that to reach that goal. So, and this is some of the advice that we heard from San Mateo County staff and this council and others, that we really, in this particular population, we really needed to combine outreach events with other existing events, go to places where residents already are. I acknowledge that there's been a significant amount of outreach in the North Fair Oaks community in the recent years. And so really the emphasis is on sharing what the outcomes of this project will be with the community once done, and what we did with that input, and how we used it to make to prioritize the remaining actions in the plan. And of course, multilingual, every thing we did, every single flyer, the website, the survey, the videos, every time we went out, we always had bilingual answers and materials in Spanish. So what will this input specifically do? So it will guide the county when evaluating which priorities to focus on in the plan. It'll help the county understand how to be more successful when implementing plan activities in the future. And it will help the county develop recommendations for any of the plan's priorities that exist right now in the plan. So we'll be taking the community and stakeholder input and making recommendations about certain things in the plan we might want to emphasize, or any changes to the plan. And I'd like to clarify that we are not updating the plan during this process. We're not doing any plan updates. We are making recommendations only on what might need to be in the future. Next slide. So I just want to talk about a couple of the strategies that we implemented. Of course, we have the survey in English and Spanish, which I mentioned. We can go to the next slide. I'll go through these pretty quickly. with your help and the help of others, we identified these organizations that work in North Fair Oaks. And so we did reach out to every one of these organizations with information about the project, with all the videos, the website, the material. We shared updates with them as we went. So that was part of our outreach strategy. Next slide. So the other piece was going to where people already are, to talk to people where they already are in North Fair Oaks. So we went to 12 different locations. One of them was on Zoom. The rest of them were in person. And so this is the list of locations. And when we were there, it's a combination of grocery stores, schools, Sequoia Adult School, Hoover Elementary School, community-wide events, Middlefield Road, of course, and several events, food distribution events. I have to say the focus of our in-person events, or really of all of our events, we knew that this was a lower income community, a Spanish speaking community. So we were focused on locations around North Fair Oaks where, there may be populations with disproportionate needs. So, food distributions, we went to a diaper distribution, ESL classes at the Sequoia Adult School, so on and so forth. We also sent out a postcard mailing to all of the residential and business addresses in North Fair Oaks. I think it was around 5,000 or 6,000 addresses. Next. As I mentioned before, we have a project website, nfoplan.com. It has all the information about the project, a brief history of North Fair Oaks and map, and the videos that we created, as well as a summary of the project. Also, where we've done the outreach events is listed on there. And as we create the plan the documents, that we'll be producing, all of that will be available on. Online engagement, we provided those community partners, materials to post on social media or to share in their newsletters. And so we did have a little bit of success there, but the majority of the success during our outreach was for in-person outreach. We really focused our efforts on in-person outreach, but we did, for example, there's a newsletter that's sent out to Middlefield. Well, I think it went out to 7,000 addresses. Forgot the exact name of the newsletter.
Sabina, are you talking about the North Fair Oaks one from OCA?
Yes, that one. Thank you. I think that's that one. So a blurb went out in that newsletter, and so we did our best to kind of get information out there through other organizations. Next slide. I already mentioned the videos; those are on our website. Next slide. And so now we come to kind of the 312 surveys that we collected in June and July, June and July, and what the data from those surveys is telling us. So first, I want to just talk about a couple of data considerations as you look at this information. So the first one is that most of the questions were check all that apply. So you'll have, not all the answer choices will add up to 312, because people will check 3 or 4 boxes or 2 boxes. And so that's one thing when you're looking at these survey results. We collected 98 surveys online and 214 in person. And like I mentioned before, we really focused for the in-person surveys on lower income bilingual Spanish speaking residents. Next slide. So the survey was in English and Spanish. We had 74 responses in English, 238 responses in Spanish. And then the numbers below show, the respondents who answered the survey. 146 said they live in North Fair Oaks, 81 work in North Fair Oaks, 60 visit North Fair Oaks, and 28 were not connected to North Fair Oaks. And the next couple of slides are a profile of who responded to the survey. Just so that we know who is providing. Go on the next slide. There's the age distribution of who responded to the survey. As you can see, we did have quite a few people in the 25 to 40 age range, which is younger than your typical survey respondents. And I think that's because we went to the Sequoia Adult School and presented at a couple of classrooms there. And I just noticed while I was there that it was a younger crowd. And so I think that might have been one of the reasons. And we did have a lot of folks in the 41 to 64 age bracket as well. Huge majority of people that took the survey were Hispanic, 238. And 166 spoke Spanish. And then 81 spoke English and Spanish. And 46 spoke only English. Next slide. So this is annual household income of the folks that responded to our survey. So yeah, we really focused on, I would say, extremely low income population. 132 respondents say that their household income is less than 39,000, which here is extremely low income. Part of the reason for this, I think, is we were at food distributions, diaper distributions. We're at the Human Services Agency. So that is part of the reason. That doesn't necessarily, it's not representative of the North Fair Oaks as a whole, but that was the population that we were focusing on for the survey. Based on where we went to collect the surveys, we have a large representation of people in that category. Internet access, we have a little bit of data on internet access, and then home ownership, 219 renters and 45 homeowners. Next slide. So now getting to the survey questions. Just want to quickly go over what we asked in the survey first before we look at the results of the survey. So the first question that we asked, we had a series of, I think it was 18 priorities, 18 different priorities. And so we asked them of the priorities below to choose 5 that are the most important to them, most important priorities to them. And then alternatively, at the next question, we asked of the 18 priorities, what are the same 18 priorities, those same choices, what are the least important priorities to them? And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to get a prioritization of these 18 different 18 different topic areas for these respondents. Next slide. This slide just shows what the answer choices were. So things like affordable housing, quality of life, with a couple of examples, parking, roads and sidewalks, protecting renters, internet access, public health and health services, schools and education, traffic congestion, so on and so forth. We did our best to explain, when we were in person, and we trained our volunteers to, give a couple examples of what some of these might represent. When there was, when the respondent didn't have clarity on what that was. Next slide. So the top priorities that came out of the survey included affordable housing, public health and health services, schools and education, quality of life such as parks, gardens, libraries, protecting renters, and police, fire, and safety. Next slide, please. We did have some conflicting priorities. So these were areas where roughly the same number of people in the survey selected that it was their top priority, and then the same number of people selected that it was not their top priority, that was their least priority. So it was like roughly around 50 or so in each of those groups. And so we decided to call this conflicting priorities. And then for medium priorities, this was, the priorities are ranked. And so these were just the ones that were in the middle group, childcare services, improving neighborhoods such as trash accumulation, community art, et cetera, small business support, the environment, and jobs for local residents. It doesn't mean that these things are not extremely important. It just means that based on relative to the top priorities, when people are forced to choose, they're choosing these less often than the top priority. Next slide. And then again, less important relative to the others. Doesn't mean that these aren't important, but these just came up less and were chosen less often as the top priorities when people were given the 18 choices. So we also asked some open-ended questions. And so one of the open-ended questions is because we wanted to learn about examples of good initiatives, and we wanted to help understand what some of the existing strengths are and understand what some good projects were. And so when we asked this question, what are North Fair Oaks services that are already available or accessible to you today? These were the top responses. And I will say that we didn't get a ton of open-ended responses to begin with. But within the ones that we got, these were the top responses. And I think for the top ones, I think it was around mid-20s, 26 people or so that selected like the top ones. And then it goes down pretty quickly from there. But the Fair Oaks Health Clinic or other health services, library services, internet access, schools and education, public transit, and food distribution for services for people in need. We also asked this additional open-ended question. Are there other priorities you would like to share? Just in case we didn't capture all of the priorities. And so again, there weren't a lot of folks entering information into these open-ended responses, but these were the top responses that were mentioned most frequently for that question. Affordable rents and housing, parking, public safety, parks, and illumination of public streets and sidewalks. So I would love to answer some questions, but I will just quickly overview what our next steps are. We're currently completing a series of memos that will include that information that we've been working on, which is what's been completed, what's left to do, what has been partially completed, and looking at where all those policies, what the status of all those policies in the plan. So we'll have one of those for each chapter. That's the technical review. We want to complete it by the end of the year. We're also doing another survey, but this isn't a community survey. This is a survey that's really for implementation staff. And so we'd like to learn from the staff that's implementing projects and initiatives in North Fair Oaks, because we'd like to hear from them about what the barriers are, what the challenges are, and what has worked. So we think that's really valuable information for us to have when we're doing this review and making recommendations for what to do and what to focus on in the future. So we're launching that on Monday of next week, and it's going to go to county staff involved in implementing the plan, and then anyone that works in North Fair Oaks in implementing these types of initiatives that are listed kind of in the answer choices, like affordable housing, infrastructure, parking, etc. So we will forward you that survey link, and if you know anyone that is involved in plan implementation, that would be great to get their feedback. The questions are different from the community survey, a little bit more open-ended, and we're hoping to gain some insight on how best to implement the plan moving forward from that survey. And that'll be open for 4 weeks, just for the month of October. If we can go back to the other slide. So we will be completing a draft of our priorities and recommendations. We hope to finish our work by December, but then we need some time to go back and forth and review that. But we're hoping to get draft priorities and recommendations by February. There's also a final piece of this project, which is performance metrics and a dashboard development, an online dashboard. So there'll be an online dashboard to track plan implementation and progress in the future, and that will include data that the county can update. County staff can update regularly on. So that will be another piece of this, and then complete this project by April. And we'd like to have a phase where we're sharing information with stakeholders, with the community, with decision makers in April, and so that we can, get as much, get the word out there and just share all of this work that we've done, and that we, to get the most bang for these efforts. I think it'll be helpful to share the information with as many stakeholders that we can. And I think the next slide is just the contact information for the team, for Steve Monowitz, Will Gibson, and our Good City team. And I think that concludes the presentation. Is there another slide? These are the additional county staff support. And so these are some of the folks that we've been working with, that have been providing us with the information that we need to complete the review. And I think that should be. So thank you for your time this evening. I'm happy to take any questions from the council members or the public.
Thank you, Sabina. Do we have questions from council members? Sure, Niket, please.
Thank you very much. Looks like you put a lot of hard work into this, some good data there. Given that you've identified that it's already focused on some areas, is that going to impact the plan at all or shift priorities in terms of how I'm sorry, I didn't see the original plan, so I'm not familiar with what the goals were of that one and how it goes. So given that it's a slice of the community, but not the whole community, do you foresee that this data affecting the direction? Is it incomplete or?
We haven't fully, analyzed all the data, and it's not just the survey that we are taking into account as an input into the overall. I think we're doing interviews, we're talking to, we're already talking to a lot of people involved in plan implementation and doing interviews, and then also looking at kind of best practices. And so the survey data is one piece, and then there's other the other things as well. So, but I think it will definitely inform, what are the needs, what is important to focus on. And the other thing is that our project isn't as in depth as an actual update. It's not a plan update. And so it's kind of unique, in that we're reviewing it and we're really letting people know, like, this is it's kind of a check-in, this is what has been done, this is what's left, and making some recommendations on what to focus on, but it's not going to completely change a goal, or a major goal, because that would happen later on, kind of in a plan update scenario. We're actually updating.
And then just to follow on, how often do you do these reviews and kind of survey check-ins? Is it like once every 4 or 5 years? Is it just the once every 12 or halfway through?
I think maybe
I could help. I could answer that. Sorry. There's no mic, so I don't. Are they just picking it up via Zoom on that mic, or is that?
There's a.
Okay.
There's a.
So thank you, and county staff can add on to this too. What the county is doing here is actually pretty unique. A lot of agencies don't actually do these type of assessments. So the fact that, excuse me, you're doing it, once every 12 years is actually more than most jurisdictions do. But what it does, there's hundreds of programs and policies. What it does is allow you to create a more precise game plan for the next 5, 10 years or what it may be. What that really means is, how do you really prioritize funding in order to implement these goals? So it could be once every 5 years. It happens to be once every 12 years this time, which is more than most agencies do, which is a good.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much.
Good call, Niket. I was gonna piggyback off what you were saying about the data being skewed into purely one direction, not getting the community as a whole. I just wanted to resonate with your
In
sentiment.
a future update or
Yeah.
survey to just maybe make sure we're a little more broad.
Yeah, getting the whole community.
So I'll answer it, and I agree. I think this is, at anything, it's not it's not going to be statistically accurate and representative of the overall community, but what it is qualitative data, and it's qualitative data in a segment of the population that typically doesn't come out to meetings, typically doesn't, have as strong a voice in meetings like this or communication. So, but you're right, you have to weight it differently than if we did something that was statistically significant.
Right. But it's my concern is we're utilizing this data to make community plan changes for the whole community.
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to keep in mind for sure. I mean, ultimately, this won't change anything in the plans. What it's going to be is just another this component of the survey is just one qualitative thing that this council and the board of supervisors will take into consideration when making the decisions about what policies or programs to focus on in the next 5 years. So I would not be our recommendation to just use the survey to make those decisions.
Thank you.
Other questions from council members? Kathleen, do you have something?
They're directed towards this, so. I guess I'm curious to know, but it's more from the county standpoint, the implementation staff and who you're talking to and how it relates back to the council and what we're supposed to be presenting. There's a disconnect there for me, so. And I think I'm just gonna state what was obvious for me is, of course, affordable housing is gonna be the #1 priority for people in this area. It just is. And I hope we, recognize that is an issue.
Big issue.
So to address your first question, I think this is ultimately, it's a tool for county staff to use when they're doing their budgeting, when they're doing their planning. And so I think that's where it's going to be the most useful because, like Aaron said, it's important to kind of look at these plans and see kind of where, to kind of what's been done, what is left, and to have that assessment is very valuable for people that are working on these initiatives. So I think that's where this is, there is a community-wide, there's community input, and there's stakeholder interviews. But I think all of that is very useful for, to share with county staff so that county staff have, the best information when they're working on these initiatives.
Other questions from council members? When we talk about the survey respondents and whether or not they're representative of the community, to me, it appears they're representative of the people that do indeed leverage county services. So in that sense, I thought the work behind the data was really, really solid, really did reach people that benefit from county services the most. I was also pleased to see that among the strengths cited were library and internet, schools, and things like that that can help give people a head start in life. Conflicting priorities, I had a question on. We had parking and traffic congestion, and you said some thought it was #1 out of 18 and some thought it was 18 out of 18? Or
Yeah, I would say, some thought it was maybe in the top 5.
okay,
And then the other half thought it was maybe in the bottom,
Yeah.
14 to 18.
Okay. I suspect you could look at a map of our community and tell where the respondents lived simply by how they responded to that question, but that's
Whether they.
neither here nor there, really.
If they're walking, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions from other council members?
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. So, one of the issues that I had mentioned, earlier, when we started having the conversation, early this year about revisiting the plan, was making an emphasis on, equity, to take into consideration the fact that this community is very different from other regular communities. And so let me give you an example. There's a lot of pedestrians and bicyclists in this community. In my view, often more than in the surrounding communities. And that may be because there's lack of transportation or, what have you. But I was looking at some of the results that say that bicycle lanes were sort of the lower priority. And many times when you put in into the options provided to people in surveys to choose between, for example, education and emergency services or bike lanes, there's definitely going to be, a lesser, a lesser number of people, falling for bicycle lanes when you're comparing it or putting it at the same level of emergency services or schools, per se. So many times I think that people could not know what they need unless you put a context where they see themselves in the reality that they function every day. North Fair Oaks does not have, one single complete lane, and that is to the detriment of the people's health, safety, and not only for the people of North Fair Oaks, but adjacent communities. If you live in San Carlos and are going to Palo Alto to work, you're in danger when you get across North Fair Oaks because there's no bike lanes, et cetera. And so going back to my initial comment about putting an equity lens on all of these, I'm curious if your organization has had experience with similar communities or doing this type of work.
So this is number one, we primarily do work in Northern California. North Fair Oaks is an extremely unique community overall. So there's nothing like an apples for apples comparison. I'm one of the owners of the company. I was planning director in San Bruno. I was also planning director in the city of Redwood City. So there are some overlapping similarities within those communities to North Fair Oaks. We also have a number of employees who've worked in similar communities, but also it's relying on staffs. It's the reason we've come to this council 4 times. It's the reason we listened to the Board of Supervisors meeting. And it's really the reasons why we're going out and surveying hundreds of people, is to hear it, because even though you might have experience in similar communities, you're not going to, have experience in that exact community. But you're right. I think we need to do everything with an equity lens. Realize that there's going to be, bias error when you're filling out a survey based on your own experiences or having to fill something out quickly. But overall, that's why we're here tonight, to listen to you who live in the community and understand the community the best. So that could help impact our recommendation, back to you later and back to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you.
I'll just add one quick,
Go ahead.
one quick thing is that, when we look at these, recommendations, we're not, going to, we're looking at ways that we can, implement the initiatives in the plan that are there, how we can best implement them. We're not looking to say, oh, these were lower priorities, let's remove them, or they don't, we're not going to be recommending that sort of thing. It's based on the survey or, based on the input that we're receiving. We're looking at the policies and we're looking at how to best implement the plan moving forward, to looking at what are the barriers and how to best implement that. So, it gives us some information that certain areas are a little less or more important than others. Some of that we already know because we have other sources of information like the affordable housing, situation. And, but at the same time, we'll take all of that into consideration when we're making any kind of recommendations, and we're really approaching it as, in a very analytical way, where we're just taking, the policy and seeing where is it today, what's the status, what's been done. And then we'll put what is the community saying for you guys to look at and decide for yourselves what you're going to do about that. Where that's the focus of the project is, what's the status, and maybe what are maybe some ways that if there is a barrier, that this could be alleviated a little bit so it can move forward. But we're not, like I said, we're not making these huge, we're going to recommend not doing bike lanes because it didn't come out of the top priority type thing. That's not going to happen.
The other thing to kind of pick up on that, Ever, as I look at this, there's, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's kind of two ways to interpret less important. One is, it's just not important to me. It's something that I don't care about in particular relative to other things. The other way to interpret a less important priority is kind of, we've got this, we're in good shape on it. If I could use, for example, internet access is listed as one of the existing strengths in North Fair Oaks, and yet it's also listed on the less important relative to others. So I'm kind of taking the message from that we have, that people are happy with the internet access that we've gotten. Therefore, it's not something we should prioritize vis-a-vis other things. So there may be when I look at bike lanes and buses and trains are included in that, I'm thinking maybe optimistically that people are pretty happy with the service that they've got right now. And maybe we ought to be looking at other things for improvement, but just a different way. I don't know if I'm on the right track there. Okay.
I guess, go ahead.
Another thing to consider is how many people have to drive out of the neighborhood to get to their job. How many people have to drive out of the neighborhood to get to the school, since they didn't choose to go to the KIPP school in Fair Oaks. And so now they're driving across to Selby Lane, but if you just look at the income and look at their probably the professions of what they do, they probably can't ride a bike. They got to drop their kids off from school. They're, headed in a different direction. There's a ton of people that low middle income that can't ride a bike to work. Just it's not going to happen, no matter what you do.
I guess what I was looking at also as part of the options, and given the population surveyed, it's really the most important things are covering basic needs, your food, your housing, your safety. If you had a different population of survey, a lot of those people be like, okay, they're important, but not as important as maybe the roads or the bike lane. And so that's kind of what I was getting at earlier in terms of the survey, and if we're going to have another survey and if it's going to get a different slice of the community type of thing. So I do think it's very valuable input in addressing what this population needs. So any programs or anything that we discuss or talk about around these needs, this is a very useful tool. I agree with you. I don't think it's something that we would use as a, be all end all for all of our programs as like a touch point. It's just, it is a data point to account for and make sure we're understanding, because data is complex, surveys are complex. And so, as I said, I think you guys did a very good job trying to make it a simple survey, but getting a lot of interesting insights out of it. So.
And the survey was open, I think for about 5 or 6 weeks, to the general community. We sent it out, we promoted it as much as possible, and anyone was able to take the survey online. Where we did some targeted outreach was for the hard to reach communities. And so that was where, because they're hard to reach, typically. So that's where we did that targeted outreach, and it worked because we looked at our results and we got that population.
With regards to the online surveys and outreach, how much of it were you using like Nextdoor or other community-based applications for that? Or was it more of like it's online, so hopefully somebody will find it type thing?
We sent it to all of the community partners on the list. I think it's 25 or 30 community partners, the organizations. We promoted it. We asked them to promote it on social media. We asked folks to share it. And I think that's one area where we were very, very focused on the in-person outreach, given what we had heard, from county staff and the council as well, is that that's where we needed to focus. And we relied on these partners to hopefully get the word out. That was kind of our approach.
It's something that maybe not for you, but in general for us, I feel like sometimes we talked about this, I think last time or the time before, it's just making people more aware of what we do and how we do it and how to be more involved with the community. So yeah, I don't think that's your fault, by the way.
Any more questions ever, please?
So I'm assuming that the data collection period has already passed, but are you still open to taking information, or that might be additional and obviously not be part of the data that you've already compiled?
Yes, we are, because we are going to have the implementation staff survey in October, and we still have some time to talk to folks. So if you know somebody that is very familiar with the community, or that has something that they'd like to share, it's the NFO plan. I think it's nfoplan.smc.gov. Email is a way to reach us. You can also email me directly. Emails in the PowerPoint presentation. And so, to connect us with those folks. And again, our goal is to help in the implementation of the North Fair Oaks Community Plan. It's, so to, identify what the barriers are and to try to help implementers, do better at implementing those policies and programs. And so any of that information is going to help that effort.
Can you walk us through a little bit? Maybe this is too early for that, kind of the process that you're going to use to gather data from the implementers. In other words, are you going to start with the survey results and say, well, this is what your constituency says is important? What have you accomplished from the community plan that kind of supports these things, or will it be more open-ended, or kind of what's the methodology there? I'm curious to.
Sure. So wish I had the draft in front of me right now. So I think we have some open-ended questions, and give me 1 second. It's pulling up right now. Okay, so one of the things that we're interested with that is just it's going to be a little bit more open-ended. We're going to survey fewer people, so it's going to give us time to kind of like read their responses, and hopefully they can share about their experiences. And so we might get people that have worked in North Fair Oaks just for a couple of years. We're going to get people that have been working North Fair Oaks for a decade or longer. And so we want to learn from kind of the highlights of those experiences. And so, for example, we're asking, what types of initiatives that they've worked on, how long that they've worked in North Fair Oaks to kind of guide us into like who we're talking to. And then one of the questions we're asking is what have community members shared with you regarding their priorities? So, because we thought that, what we're really interested in is over the course of their experience working in North Fair Oaks, what have community members shared with them that is most important in North Fair Oaks? Because we think that's kind of a source of info that's probably pretty rich, and and then we can. We're not necessarily going to, compare that to our other survey. I don't think there'd be a reason necessary to do that, but it just kind of enhances the information we have about what the priorities are in North Fair Oaks. And then again, we ask about what are the greatest challenges to implementing programs to learn from that. And then what are some of the programs and policies that had the most positive impact on quality of life in North Fair Oaks? Because just to, we'd like to see, understand what works, what are good examples, good practices, and kind of have that information as we're looking at barriers to other things that haven't been successful, and trying to maybe learn from some of the successes and apply, if there's relevant lessons to be learned, to kind of apply that. So that's kind of the gist of the staff implementation survey is, less what they've learned, what are some good examples, what are some good practices, and then what the community has shared with them being the priorities. So it's much more open-ended than.
So if I understand it from kind of the macro level of the project, we'll start out with the old community plan. We'll say, these were the initiatives that the implementers implemented. And you can talk results of those projects, add in some community feedback, what the implementers have heard from the community. And then maybe you'll have a second column that says, well, these are the things we said we were going to do 10 years ago. Never got around to doing them, and perhaps map those back to things that not only the implementers, but also the community says, this is still important to us. Marry those two things in the recommendation for kind of, here are the things you ought to be focusing on going forward. Do I kind of have that at a
that's
macro
one
level?
that's one of the
Okay.
that's one of them. The only other thing I'll say is that we aren't only trying to just highlight certain the top things that folks should be focused on. I think this will also be useful for just in each individual department or area to see what are the priorities within this smaller area, what has been completed, what were the barriers. So within the infrastructure. So I think it'll be useful for that purpose as well.
Other questions from council members?
Follow up to this open-ended survey that you plan in the future. So is this only for county staff you mentioned, or county departments?
It's not only for county staff. It's not going to be community-wide. So, we would like folks to take it that are involved in implementing policies, programs, or projects in North Fair Oaks. We have a list of initial folks, and it includes a lot of county staff. But we also want to include others that might not be county staff that work on implementing, projects. So whether they're, so.
Would this include like community-based organizations or?
That's what I'm thinking. Like if
stakeholders,
there's a
this
non-profit.
council, for example?
Yes, this council, yes, not-for-profit organizations that provide services in North Fair Oak directly, that sort of thing, either staff or management or staff level folks that have been there for a while and provide some input about that service delivery, that sort of thing.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because there's certainly, some of those people are more invested, I would say, in in regular contact with residents who might have voiced, some concerns, complaints, whatever. Thank you.
Other questions? Going once. Okay. Thank you both very much, Sabina, Aaron, for tonight. I learned a lot about the survey results and the work that you're doing for the community. I'm thinking we can schedule follow-ups, perhaps for February, when the current priorities and recommendations draft will be ready, as well as the performance metrics in the dashboard, perhaps a final presentation April, May of next year. And everything is done. Does that sound like good checkpoints for you? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me. Is there any public comment? I know we have people online tonight. Call for public comment. Let's give folks a moment to. Okay, well, thank you very much. And thank you both very much. Let's see, agenda item number 4, report outs. Nobody from county executive tonight, I guess. Emma, do you have anything to report out tonight from the county level? We still have Emma.
Hi, Brooks, I'm here. No, nothing to report out. Thank you.
Okay, council members, Blair.
Nothing to report tonight.
Okay, Juan Carlos.
Yeah, I would like to share with you that I had the opportunity to go to the North Fair Oaks party
Oh,
held in our neighborhood, and it's quite successful. Put together by the Fair Oaks Beautification Association. So I want to congratulate them on their hard work, and also the businesses in the community that sponsored the event. They're very generous. State of Mind Pizza donated over 20 pizzas for the community.
oh, wow.
Delucci's donated several cases of wine. Sorry, you guys missed out.
Yeah.
Very good one. But I just want to give props to the businesses in the community that helped out, and hopefully next year we'll have a greater participation. The neighbors that played instruments went out there and played music, lots of kids, and it was a great gathering. It was weather-wise a beautiful afternoon. So just want to share that.
Okay, Ever, anything to report out tonight?
Attended a couple of meetings with the Menlo Park Fire District. They hired a person who's going to be the liaison between that fire department and community organizations that do work around disaster preparedness. So that's a good thing, in my opinion, because those community groups, specifically from the cities of Atherton and Menlo Park, East Palo Alto as well, would be in better communication with the fire department. And North Fair Oaks, as you probably all know, gets half covered by the Menlo Park Fire Department. And so they're also, we are also, in those discussions from the preparedness perspective. That's about it.
Okay, Niket, anything tonight?
It's tree trimming season, so we're getting a lot of trees in the neighborhood. I think that's good for the health of the tree, but there's also a bit of PTSD going on with the neighbors and trying to figure out if their trees are being trimmed or removed. We've had a few notifications, so I do think the county's been doing a little bit better in responding. I would like to see if we can get on the future an update on the tree plan and the environmental plan for the county, and see what we can do in terms of helping along the process and making things more aware of what's happening and why things are happening for the trees.
Okay, I've got tree ordinance on my list for an upcoming meeting, and it's really dependent on when the draft ordinance is ready. And Kenny have Kenny, the tree ordinance, do we have do we have an idea of when that might be ready for review?
We're thinking November, sorry,
Thanks.
I think October or November. I've talked to Lisa, and so I'll get back to you, Brooks.
Yeah, I know we'd gone around on a few months on that, and I seem to recall November, but I didn't want to say that if it wasn't true, so.
Yes,
that would be
yes,
coming.
that's what I believe. That's where Lisa last left it off.
Okay, that sounds great. Anything else, Niket?
So, yeah, no, just looking forward to learning more about the tree ordinance, seeing what we can do with that and, you know, how we can help this whole process along, so.
Yeah, it's gonna be a big year for trimming, given the weather that we had last winter. The oaks in our area have just crazy and are very dense, and
Yeah. and
there's one that overhangs my house, and it's a little scary to see how thick, and I mean, it's a wonderful tree, but that's heavy wood, and
Needs a little bit of tender loving care and
Yeah,
stuff like
so-
that, yeah.
so there'll be a lot of that activity this year. Kathleen, anything to report out tonight? No, George?
I've been taking the Civics 101 class as recommended by Vice Chair Whitney. Phenomenal class. It's a great way to learn about the community as a whole, how the county services work, where everything's laid out. So highly recommend it.
Hey, great. Anything else?
That's it.
All right, thanks. I've got a couple of meeting updates. I went to the neighborhood response team meeting last week. There was a discussion about having tables outside the restaurants on Middlefield Road once we're all done there. Susie Castoria from Supervisor Slocum's office has investigated this. And it seems like it's a possibility. There's a measurement that's required just for access, and fire department gets involved so they can get to fire hydrants and things like that, whether or not bottles and glasses will be allowed out there. But it sounds like something that might be feasible given the new wider sidewalks. Matter of interest, environmental health reported there's going to be more enforcement of the flavored tobacco ordinance in the unincorporated areas. We in the county had banned the sale of flavored tobacco, I believe, about 5 years ago. It's gone statewide now, and the state and local law enforcement's getting very serious about enforcement. You may have seen where
Last week.
a couple of $100,000 worth in San Mateo. I think it was last month, something like that. So we're gonna get a Middlefield Road update at an upcoming council meeting. Actually in November. The plan now is for PG&E to pull the wires in October. And apparently this takes some time. It's not like you start on one end and just pull it all through in one day. It's gonna take 2 or 3 months, but end of the year, perhaps the wires will be pulled through and will be virtually done. Housing element was discussed. I've stayed in touch with Will Gibson of Planning and Building. As everyone knows, the county still does not have a state-approved housing element. Keep going back and forth. The state keeps rejecting the county's proposal. Will had informed me that revisions are underway, but that the changes that are being considered are outside of North Fair Oaks. Most of the additional housing that's going to be created, because as everyone here knows, we took a substantial portion of the housing needs over the next 8 years for the unincorporated communities. Any increases to that, it appears right now, we're going to come out of North County. What else do I have? Saturday, October 7th. I think this would be on everyone's calendar. The celebration is going to be held for the community murals at the Fifth Avenue overpass, 11:30 to 1 o'clock. Program starts at noon. Supervisor tells me he'll be in attendance for that. So everyone come out and celebrate this wonderful addition to our community.
They're looking good by the other day, so.
Yeah, I am just, 2 things amaze me. First of all, how beautiful they are. And the second one, I drove through there when they had been prepped and there was all this wonderful white concrete there and not a single one had any graffiti on it at any time. Which pleased me very much. Let's put it that way. Still have vacancies open on the council. We have received several applications for our vacant spots. The application period closes October 6th. So if you know of anyone who's interested, please encourage them to apply. We'll conduct interviews after the 6th of October. That is my update. Thanks to our presenters tonight, members of the public who attended. I believe we had a few online. And as always, thanks to our county staff, Emma, Kenny, and Josh, Jennifer, Bo, and Tim for their support. Our next meeting's a regular session, October 26th from 7 to 9. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
So can you tell me more about the flavored tobacco ban? I know we had implemented it a
Yeah,
while ago, but
so there's been a lot more crackdowns, especially like basically all up and down the peninsula. It was a thing because like Jewel was against it, all that, but it's really targeting the kids and all that. Selling it, but the one in San Mateo that they raided, it was almost like a speed